Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question for Dylan regarding which were the main challenges you faced when you started with this project of satellite accounts, and now what are other searches are you exploring to add to your project? And for Serafino, I would like to know if you are including in the ECB some kind of indicators, or in which way are you incorporating this new digital economy? And to Elias, to thank him, because he's always reminding us the work that we have to do, and it's a challenge. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your presentation. My question is to Dylan, is in line with the glorious one. And what kind of source of information have you developed or have you explored to measure the digital transaction in order to capture and to isolate from the core statistics? And if the approach is just adjusted the business service, how the business have responded to this new demand of information? Thank you.
So for Dylan, so you mentioned that you have are currently cooperating with Canada in regard to a particular topic that you mentioned. What is an appropriate typology of data? So I would like to know a little bit more about the specifics of that project, because it might be helpful for us in a particular thing that we are currently working.
Okay, well, thank you for your question. We will start with Celestino.
Yeah, there was these questions on where are the sources of information we have at the European Central Bank. They refer mainly, or even only, to financial items, crypto assets, and alternative finance, fintech. We are doing what we can up to now, which is basically relying on commercial data providers or public information available via websites. I have mentioned a paper that was also a recent paper in May-June, the ECB bulletin, where there is an explanation of exactly how this is done. But the summary is basically what I have done. We go for what is available out there. Unfortunately, these are areas that are not regulated, that are not supervised generally, not sufficiently supervised and regulated. So the ability to have, let's say, official channels for getting data are not there. We hope that in the future we will be in a position to do so, but so far what we do is only relying on data that is available on the financial sector only. Unfortunately, we cannot do much on other areas that are not falling under the responsibility, direct responsibility of the European Central Bank.
Tyler.
Okay, thank you. So I think if I understood, I just want to clarify the first question: what are we adding to the satellite accounts in the coming months or in the near future? So cloud services is one of those areas where we have preliminary estimates and expecting to be adding that to the work on digital satellite account, as well as primary products that are primarily digital that have been more recently identified. We'll be adding as well. And then we'll be adding a component on partially digital products for trade margins, both retail and wholesale trade margins that we can estimate using information from our wholesale trade surveys and retail trade surveys on e-commerce sales to total sales. We just use ratios of e-commerce sales to total sales. Things that we would like to include in working on estimates are free services as well as data. These are sort of outside the scope of the current S&A boundaries, although we could argue that free services, advertising supported services, the advertising of course is in the supply use tables as intermediate consumption, and we could argue that the final consumption also belongs in there as a sort of barter transaction, since those are within scope of the S&A boundaries. Second question on sources of information that have been explored, data that have been used to actually measure data. So the estimates that I showed for purchase data, they come, so we haven't gotten fancy. We've used existing statistical sources and traditional measurement methodologies. So we're using a sum of costs for own account, and we're using existing statistical sources for both own account and the purchase data. We use information from our economic census and our annual surveys on services for the purchase portion, and from our employment statistics on wages and salaries for the own account piece. We've limited the estimates that we showed here today are limited to private industries. So we've left out government, we've left out nonprofits, and we're not saying that their data aren't valuable necessarily, but generally their data that they collect are either confidential data or available to the public and aren't used for commercial purposes. So that's why we focused on private industries for this initial cut. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Elias, I don't think you want to add something? No? Okay. So I don't know if there is another question. Okay, it seems that there's not. So we finish this session. Please give another applause to the panel.